Recording in progress.
So now you have to be erudite and memorable.
Right. And there more than one way to be memorable, I suppose. Mhm. Yeah, anyway, what do we do now?
Well, normally you ask us if we have any questions.
Oh yeah, do you have any questions?
I think, what did we decide to read for, like, up to for today?
So we were talking about Tonglen. That's what Jim
Mhm.
was talking about,
Yeah,
Tonglen.
Tonglen.
And if you have an overview or a sort of a guide about doing Tonglen, that would be pretty much appropriate, right?
Mhm.
I actually have a question about the technique of
Mhm.
Tonglen, and that is um, when we are taking in, we're taking in the suffering, but not the pain. So, in other words, if we know that somebody's got a broken, just had their leg broken, they're in awful discomfort, and we are doing Tonglen for that kind of suffering or for somebody, we are kind of taking on in our way that we kind of frame it is that all the additional grief they are giving themselves, that type of suffering, as opposed to like, there isn't really a way of going taking in their broken legs pain, but all the mental anguish around having a broken leg. So is it necessary for us to kind of parse the two aspects of their discomfort, the physical pain and the suffering that they bring on themselves because of their own observations, their own confusion, their own whatever? Uh, and that's such a kind of a modest kind of little example, but I was just been a little bit curious about
Yeah. Mm. First of all, you can't effectively take either of those.
that. Right,
Yeah.
right.
If that was possible, the supreme of taking suffering, our common reference point, Buddha Shakyamuni, have done that for us, taken all our suffering, like Jesus on the cross, and
Right.
would all be home free now. So, first of all, that's not possible. So we still, need to kind of be clear about like what exactly, what are we taking? Are we taking anything? In the end, I think we're taking our own confusions. And using that taking of our own confusions that then give rise to suffering as a way to soften, our annoyances and intolerance of others, and our lack of concern and lack of, care, and our prioritizing of self over others. And so we are quote unquote taking suffering in that sense, Now, there, there, there are rare cases where due to another set of interdependence, it might be able to take the other person's suffering. Again, not literally, or not in a kind of perfect way that we think of taking, but that there are, like they say, interdependent, meaning you have a karmic history of some sort with this person.
Just muted.
No,
Sorry.
sorry. Go ahead, sorry.
Yeah. And so you could, in those rare cases, be a condition for the relief of suffering of the other person. So with regards to your question of parsing out these two things, I think from the perspective of, in any case, we cannot take, then maybe there's no difference. But differentiating the two does help, us have some clarity about the difference between pain and suffering, and how to not put those two together as if they're the same thing and that there's a difference. So it can be helpful, in that way. And overall, the use of this technique, you have to try it to see if it's helping. If it's not helping, it's not because it doesn't work. If it's not helping, it means it's not helpful to you at this point or in this situation.
I have a question. I have a couple of questions.
Mm-hmm.
We have all the different books and a couple of different books. One said, breathe in. Okay, so they're in front of you and you breathe in their dark, whatever it is. And it goes in through your nose and down to your heart center. And then that's when you can either pause and think about it, take a little time, or then you have to get to the place where you're happy and you're wonderful and you're giving them, your happiness. And then one time I read, and another, because, we've got this going on, is that when you breathe it in, it goes through your whole body. And then you breathe it out through your whole body to them.
That's the question? Oh,
That's the question right now. I forgot. Yeah.
Oh, so that's the question is which one?
The question is, does it matter?
Oh.
If you only see the light coming up and doing it this way, or if you see it through all the pores of your body, going to all their pores of the body, it's just a very basic question.
Yeah, it depends on the individual. You experiment and you see, what works better for you. The old commentaries don't necessarily go into so much detail on that. So I think it's always been left to the individual to experiment. So these different books, there's different teachers with different experiences, guiding students with different experiences, practicing this themselves, have offered, various methods, various nuances for these practice, including what Nick suggested could be another nuance to this practice. So there's a lot of shapes and textures in this practice to be discovered and to be honed, to be developed into what does the job for you. And so knowing what the job is, I think, would help us explore these nuances and textures without getting carried away. We are like in the jungle with crickets, I think.
We're having crickets now. Yeah, must be our.
Breathe in all the crickets and breathe out.
Can you hear it, Dr. Lye?
Oh, I can hear. I can hear.
I'm gonna try something here for a second. Wait 1 second. Let me just see if it's helping.
Oh, yes.
See, there's other stuff. Okay. There's other stuff going on our television that's taking charge of itself. And we're gonna stop it. I'm sorry.
In my area, we call it possession.
It possesses us, yeah. It keeps trying to show us CNN stuff. I don't know why. So here, let me share us back and see if we can take over.
I almost didn't perceive.
See, I have to stop. I have to stop. Hang on. I have to stop that. That's what's the problem right there now. How do I turn that off? Yeah. All right. Okay. We're going to stay where we are. Hopefully, we're going to connect back to the television. I'm sorry. No. I don't know how to stop that.
Bob, Ted, and Alice.
Okay. Hopefully it will leave us alone now. It's what, when you buy these cheap televisions, they come with all this, which this one was, it was only a couple $100. It comes with all this, like show you ads and stuff. They dish up all this stuff and it's very hard to get rid of it.
Right, right.
So that's what's going on here.
That's how
Trying
they
to get this back, yeah.
subsidize your price.
It does. Yeah, that's right. You get, that's the price you pay. Okay, now how do I get him back to full screen?
No, the bottom right corner.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Cheryl.
Thank you.
Okay, I have another question.
Okay, Karen, go ahead.
Is there feedback?
No, we
No.
can hear you.
We can hear a feedback, yeah. Karen is
hear
here. I'm
feedback?
hearing feedback, yeah.
Yeah, I hear feedback.
Hear Karen twice. No more now, I think.
Okay. All right. Anyway, my other question is another basic, and it is, so it says that we're supposed to be giving them our happiness. So what if I'm not happy every minute and then it comes up and I really want to do it for somebody, but I'm not really in a happy.
That's why I said, like, you cannot give what you don't have, And then if you take and you cannot digest, then this is when it backfires. So more stability in absolute bodhicitta practice has to be the safety net that you need before you go on this tightrope. Then if so Tonglen again, like I don't know, it's just the way it has been taught, I guess, in the West. It's almost like do that for people. It's not really for other people in that limited sense of immediately for other people. It's not going to take away their toothache. It's not going to take away their heartache. It's going to change your relationship with that person, no doubt. I think that will change. So I would say, like if you want to do practices for others, any of the deity practice where you're radiating light, Genrezi, Tara, Vajrasattva, those are good. Tonglen is a very advanced practice. You exactly, your question, highlights how it cannot be just for anybody to engage in. Especially many of us, I feel, especially in the West, there is a certain, maybe because of the background of Christianity, I don't know if I can totally blame it on Christianity, but there's a background of like martyrdom as the way to get to sainthood, and then the suffering Christ on the cross, all of that. Yeah. Now we don't even need to be Christian, to have that kind of belief, that kind of thinking lurking somewhere in our background, right? So then we feel that, if we feel sad, if we feel melancholy, oh, that's somehow very spiritual, and that that can become very heavy. There was a book many years ago. It was published. I read it at that time and I liked it, and I think I still like it. I've just that I've not read it recently. Something like it was written by this person called Harvey Aronson, who is the partner of Anne Klein, who is both a major scholar and a Tibetan Buddhist teacher in her own right. In Rice University, she was a professor, maybe now retired from Rice University, and her husband also has a PhD in Buddhist studies, and he wrote a book called Buddhism Ground, because he's trained also as a psychologist and therapist, and so that book really talked about how often he would be translating for Tibetan lamas. And at first he said that he was translating literally what people were saying to the Lama from English into Tibetan, and how he would be horrified by what the Lama then says in return. And at first he thought his job is to faithfully, meaning literally, translate what the Lama says back to the student and what the student says, to the Lama. But more and more he found that no, his job is to also unpack what the student is saying for the teacher. Because for a long time at the beginning, basically from his psychology and therapist background, he could tell that this person is suffering from clinical depression. So what they're expressing is, a lot of it is coming from this clinical depression. And what the Lama is hearing is, oh, this person really understands the nature of samsara. So the Lamas are like, very good, very good. This is wonderful that you feel this way.
Yeah.
So he said, even for a short time, this person seems to do better, But then the problem is that this person is not going to get better and will get worse. He needs a different kind of help, So more and more, not just here, even in Asia, I think people, due to all sorts of very complex things going on, right? Media consumption, food, consumption, chemicals, la la la, right? Like they talk about these tiny particles of plastic, like that is in our system. Got to do something to us. Oh, of course, all of this is due to our karma, you know. From one perspective, life conditions as we are living it now seems to contradict what the Buddhist scriptures are saying, because the Buddhist scriptures paint a picture of the golden days of Buddha Shakyamuni. Things get worse and worse and worse and worse and worse and worse and worse, right? You're like, well, at least for me, like I'm like, well, I don't know. Buddha Shakyamuni's time, people live until 40 and they drop dead. And now we live until 95 and we still don't want to die, right? So from one perspective, it looks like it's contradicting the Buddhist scriptures. But I think it's only contradicting the Buddhist scriptures on like the very outer layer. The inner layer, indeed, at 40, we die. At 35, we die, so to say. Right? So then we're walking around like living corpses, zombie of sorts, right? So in that sense, I think more and more we got to be careful. I think some of you already know. I'm not going around advocating Tonglen necessarily. I advocate a modified version of that, which is breathe in good and goodness and wellness, breathe out goodness and wellness. At least do that. No mischief, no side effects, will come from that. Yeah. Then, as I said, when you can, like a magician, summon happiness at will, meaning the feeling of happiness at will, then, yes, Karen, I agree. Then I can do Tonglen, right? Then the suffering that I breathe in can be dispelled by not only the absolute bodhicitta, but can be overwhelmed by the happiness that exists here. Like it's like throwing ice into fire. You know, it will just make the fire grow stronger. It will make the happiness grow stronger if the fire is strong enough. When the fire is not strong enough, you throw a bucket of water in,
That's why, I think for me that practicing at home, practicing Tonglen on the cushion is so very great because it expands your capacity. And so then, when you're in front of your boss, and you really want to do Tonglen. I mean, you really do.
Yeah.
Because
So
I see myself going through all these stages. So you can really get strong on the cushion and then, and then it gets easier outside.
yeah, so you grow your capacity and you take charge of your own process. You grow your capacity on and it's not like it's not like an overall state whether you're there you're not there. Like there are ups and downs. Some days you have more capacity, some days you absolutely have no capacity. So know thyself, know when to take and when to put down. When you're not feeling good about yourself, when you're not feeling good about yourself, if you're still doing this practice, there the instruction already says, start with yourself, right? The fifth line, meaning the 10th line of this section, but the fifth line of this subsection, begin with yourself. So you're feeling not good about yourself. You're feeling kind of self-pity, all that, right? We all go through that. And if we want to use this technique, then this is when you say, oh, poor self, you're suffering. here, let me give you a hug, yeah, it's like watching a child, right? Then we can watch our inner child that is suffering right now. It's like watching a child, like a
I think
child,
that's beautiful.
yeah, a child is upset, and the child gets upset because it has not learned yet, right? How to deal with disappointment. So the upset is very real. So we can accept. This is talking about taking our own suffering, meaning accepting our own suffering, not in the wrong way. Like to, you're clinically depressed. You're accepting in that wrong way. There's a skillful way of accepting, and then there's the unskillful way of accepting. This one is like, here, let me give you a hug. Uh, I accept you. Because not accepting that suffering could be like shaming that suffering, right? Especially the spiritual types like us, sometimes we shame our own suffering. You're like, oh, you're an embarrassment to me. Like imagine saying that to a child. You won't say that to a child. Don't say that to your inner child either, because now the inner child has turned up, uh, the inner child that is uh, suffering, you know and then we can start with that. So primarily the Tonglen practice is a practice of healing ourselves, but healing ourselves so that we can be better at healing others when we're actually in front of them. See, it changes, right? Your example of the boss, training here prepares me to have a better relationship with the boss, the unreasonable neighbor, you know, those politicians across the street. Primarily it's that, that's where it changes. Yeah. So I would say don't immediately when you hear someone suffering, oh, I will do Tonglen for you. It's like, no, I will do Tara practice for you. I would do Chenrezig, and those of you who don't know these deity practices, oh, I will radiate metta, goodwill, friendliness, kindness to you. Good, very good. So you have to remember that even in like Atisha's time, it said that this set of instructions that we now call Lojong in general, and then more specifically Tonglen, not just the method of Tonglen, but even the topic of Lojong, apparently, Atisha said to his disciples, don't publicize this. But keep it close to your heart, a few of you. Do it until you have real experience with it. And then when Tibet is ready, a few generations later, this can become more publicly taught and practiced. So he had a seal, so to say, what we call a seal of secrecy, put onto these this set of instructions for now, and for a while. It said that he did not teach them publicly. Yeah, um, so it requires, it requires a lot of paying attention to developing self-awareness. Don't like, they say, Dalai Lama says, don't practice idiot compassion. Like the heroic, I'm going to take on suffering. And it becomes very natural, I think, when we begin to understand that it's developing a capacity in ourselves, it's removing the obscurations from ourselves. I think that when we do that in the right way, it becomes very easy, you know. So when we see suffering, we say, "Oh, I give it to me." It's not artificial, you know, a genuine. And when it's genuine, a lot of times, like you're in front of that person, when it's genuine, not always, but a lot of times when it's genuine, right? They recognize, you know, they recognize. I heard this interview of one of the Western lamas, Kandro Kunsang, a Nyingma teacher. Before she married her teacher, they follow the non-monastic. The Nyingma tradition is still predominantly monastic, despite in the West maybe we think they're not. Predominantly monastic, but there's also a strong non-monastic tradition, the Ngakpa tradition. So Kandro Kunzang was a nun first. In fact, she was a nun in the Drigong lineage. Then later she met her teacher and teacher partner, but it was her teacher's teacher who said to her, you should, you know, marry him. Anyway, she talked about, in this interview, she talked about in being in the same vehicle, a Western monk was driving, younger Western monk was driving. She was sitting in the back, and with two of Gachen Rinpoche's monks, and Gachen Rinpoche was sitting on the passenger side in the front. And it was maybe in the summer and the windows are all down. So they came to a light, and then very quickly next to them, also at a stop, was a truck. Windows were down. And these guys, you know, they were a little rowdy. And then they turned and they saw this whole car full of, you know, funny looking people. And then they started yelling at them, like, go get a job, you parasites, and, you know, just yelling. And the driver, you know, American young monk, was visibly, you know, affected. And this nun, you know, she was like physically really affected. And then Gachen Rinpoche, of course, didn't understand any English at this point. This is when he first arrived. But not understanding the words even, he could tell the aggression. But she said that he turned and he looked at them and he just had this big smile. A big smile, you know, his signature smile, just this big smile. And she said that she could see like this carload of guys just froze. And the light turned green and they drove and the truck just stopped there. It was like they were frozen. So Rinpoche is, you know, love and compassion, you know, just froze them. Just stopped them in their tracks, you know.
Wow.
Yeah, that pacifying activity. That just like completely disarmed them. They didn't know what to do. And it's genuine, you know. And that comes from the training in the cushion at home, right? The daily.
Right.
So the cushion at home is going to be a little clunky, a little bit awkward because it's, you know, you're training, you know. But the idea of the training is so that when you are in you know, in the field, right, something genuine will come out. And that which is genuine that comes out has the power to pacify whatever difficulties that arise.
You know, I've had several incidents where it's worked in my life. Like I was really hating on somebody, and then, you know, I clicked
Mhm.
and started giving them love. And they would like be way across the room and come over and start talking to me. Or like in an AA meeting, you know, they never call on me and then they call on me because I'm, you know, so I've had some really wild experiences, and it's something that I really believe in. And, you know I talk about the big book, but the big book says, you know, pray for somebody for 2 weeks.
Mhm.
So it's kind of like the same thing. And I just, you know, have believed in it for a long time.
It changes our relationship with others.
Yeah.
As for taking away their toothache or heartache, uh, not so easy, but definitely changes our relationship with them.
Mhm.
And that is because, we're removing the kleshas from us. When the kleshas are being removed, then the Buddha qualities shine forth more brightly. That's why we call them obscurations, because they're obscuring the light that is there, the light that is within, the light that is there.
Thank you.
Others? Any other question? Yes.
You had mentioned a little while ago about in the West, the fact that they're living much longer, and indicated that they kind of die out around 40. That whole discussion was a little confusing to me. Would you elaborate? I know it wasn't a central theme, but it caught my attention. It's just worth, I kind of would like to know more about that, your perspective on that.
Well, nothing too literal, that's all.
Well, for some of us, probably, or speaking for myself, that process was instrumental in causing me to search.
Yes.
And if I didn't have that dead place
Mm-hmm.
in the middle of my life,
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't have searched for
Yeah.
something.
Yes. Yeah, that's good.
Do you think that's different in the East, where you perhaps are brought up with this type of training?
No,
Or is it more age related?
no, not much different.
So it's just what happens with youth.
Hmm?
So youth tends to get infatuated with this physical world, and spirituality comes later for some people.
Yeah, I think if ever.
Yeah.
Yeah, if ever,
There seems to be a long history in the West of people becoming disenchanted with their spiritual experience, and then a smaller subset where that doesn't seem to happen. I
Mhm.
come in the former,
Uh-huh.
and from what I've seen with my cohort, it was very common
Mhm.
that by the time I reached a certain age, that I was inclined to trash all of this religious upbringing as not particularly relevant.
Yeah, I think that's true for many cultures, because what I think many of these religions have to offer is hidden in is inside the institutions, the culture, the church, the temples, the places that we go up. And at one point, it made sense to be part of our self definition. At one point, just speaking of churches, at one point churches had a uh, much bigger role to play in people's lives, and then when churches stopped the ability to do that, then yeah, it's just rendered less meaningful. I'm a I'm trained in the academic tradition of studying religion, so just to take from the from the vantage point of food, uh, and churches, just taking that vantage point, we see a lot of things. One possible reason why churches begin to have less meaning in people's lives in this culture, right? Uh, there is a direct relationship between the rise of restaurants and cafes and the decline in church attendance. You're like, what?
Yeah.
I mean, some of us are, some of you, I didn't grow up here, so I can say some of you, not because I don't think I'm old enough. But some of you, I'm sure, remember, right? There weren't so many other social spaces where you could go eat and drink, in which church was one of those places. And churches used to have nice, meals. Churches used to have these kitchens and all these chinaware and silverware, and there is the men's group and the women's group and the youth group, and the sandwiches and the potlucks and the sit down dinners and all of that, right? And at that time there were a lot fewer restaurants or cafes. And then, and this is like, it's not just one thing, like why churches stopped to do those social dinners, social meal events as vigorously as they used to. Ironic. It also had to do with the crisis in food distribution, famines in Ethiopia, famine in China. So then mainstream churches felt guilty about having all these meals. So then eventually, right, church basements turned into soup kitchens. That's a very different relationship with food now that's going on in the church. Uh, they stop being social spaces. I could go on and on. There's even older examples of like the emergence of coffee houses in the Middle East threaten religious authorities, because in the past, where did people gather to chit chat? At the mosque courtyard. But then when cafes turn up, people went to cafes to chit chat. And when you're chit chatting in a cafe, uh, the church, so to say, the mosque, the church, the government can't watch so closely. Then ideas of, subversive ideas begin to pop up. So I think in that sense, right, our I don't know. I kind of like looking at, what are churches going to the kind of religion that can continue to make meaningful impact in people's lives. That kind of religion will continue. The kinds that don't speak to people's experiences anymore will disappear. Same in Asia, you know.
Well, this idea in the West of a spiritual crisis, which tends to be fairly understood, is that also applicable in the East?
What do you mean by spiritual crisis?
A profound dissatisfaction with place and time and lack of understanding of meaning. So that starts the search.
Mm, not so strongly, because I think the loss of meaning and all of that is also related, at least here, is related to family and social relationships reconfiguring. Not happening so strongly in Asia, but it is happening, you know. and and the rest of the world, you know, wants all the good stuff of the what the West has. The creation of the microwave, you know, innocent enough, I think, is part of the equation, so to say. Everyone can go microwave their own food at their own time and eat at their own time. Well, there you go. People don't eat together anymore in the family. That got to lead to some kind of dissatisfaction. And then the ones who want to cling on to that insist that we have to eat together, right? That's not going to solve the problem either, because everybody else's family aren't eating together. Why am I stuck with eating with my family together? And that gives me no satisfaction either. Yeah, you know, I think society at the faster space is reconfiguring itself. And I think our bodies and minds are having a hard time catching up. Not necessarily a Dharma analysis, but the social anthropological analysis of crisis of faith. Then deep down, the Buddha says, you know, like, you know, dukkha is dukkha, you know, suffering is suffering, you know, it comes up. So okay, back to the, you know, we live to 100 years, we are dead at 40, you know. The principle of karmic causality and the principle of, you know, samsara, confused existence, is that, you know, in a way you could say we all have, right, a certain amount of negative karma that is constantly ripening, as well as good karma that is constantly ripening. So the good karma is ripening more and more in the form of uh, physical suffering, we call pain, and inconveniences. A lot of energy has gone into removing that way of suffering turning up. But and suffering turns up because why? Because negative karma summons them, so to say. Our negative karma summons them. So suffering has to come. Now suffering cannot come so easily in the form of, right, physical problems, because we put so much energy in ensuring, you know, physical suffering, you know, what we call pain, you know, is less and less and less and less. But still, you know, our negative karma is still summoning suffering to come. So suffering has to find another way to reach us. Then more and more mental pain and anguish. Yeah, so technology has also made it easier for us to keep to ourselves, because we don't need to rely on others. So one side of ourselves really love that, I don't need to rely on other people. Love that. But it also means, right? When you do want people, it's not so easy to get their attention. Because everyone has been habituated with, I do my own thing, you do your own thing, right? Then as there are more and more people on this earth, because technology is allowing that to happen, then more and more we want to, I want to do my own thing. Yes. So the
Well,
only,
so,
yeah,
well, Dr. Lye, so it sounds like we have all these forces going on around us that are encouraging us to just wallow in our own minds, so to speak,
yeah, yeah,
and also really carefully avoid being upset or inconvenienced. And this Tonglen practice is a genius practice for undermining that that tendency. So, I mean, my own experience with it is that if I, like, I have a friend who's dying right now and I'm with her and I don't like being there, it hurts, it's painful, and what the Tonglen does is like
yeah,
soften my side
yes,
of the picture,
right,
let me be braver,
yes,
more like
yes,
I can handle this,
right,
and not
right,
retreat.
yes.
And it's very powerful, but it doesn't, I mean, maybe that helps her because I'm there with her in a more calm
Yeah,
way
oh,
or something.
that, yes, that for sure, yes.
Yeah. But I mean, that's the path. So this practice is really good in terms of countering the world that we're facing right now and
Mhm,
all the distraction and all that kind of stuff. It's like, go
mhm,
out, just go out, whatever, however you can do it. Like, I love your suggestion about just meta, if that's
mhm.
what you can do, but go ahead and go out instead of closing in,
Yes.
watching your own Netflix. Let him watch his Netflix and you
Yeah.
watch your Netflix. I mean, but
Oh
you're
yeah. I mean,
in the same space. That's ridiculous.
Netflix gives you the option, right? Every room in the house to have their own,
Their own. Yeah.
one account for.
Yeah.
It's
I'm
all
missing my
very
grandchild.
innocent. It's all very innocent. I mean, maybe there's a cabal, trying to
No.
get self-destruct, but I think no, it's all very innocent. It's just
Yeah.
feeding our confusion.
Yeah.
It's created by confusion to feed confusion.
Yeah.
Mhm. So yeah, we have to choose. And that also means you can't quite force them. Yeah. So I think having some understanding of we can't quite force them, having some sense ability to have a sense of humor about it,
Yeah.
be able to laugh about it and say, "Oh my gosh, look at how ridiculous we are."
Dr. Lye,
Yeah.
I was wondering if you could say something about the third line of the second part of relative bodhicitta. In all of the 10 lines, there's,
Mhm.
I mean, in 9 of them, it's do this, do this, do this. And in this one, the 3 objects, the 3 poisons, and the 3 roots of virtue, there's just these subjects that are put there without really well, what do you do with this?
Yeah, it's a very pithy reminder of, when you are off cushion, you come into contact. What do you come into contact with? Things you like, people you like, situations you like. things you don't like, people you don't like, situations you don't like, things you don't have any particular reaction to, people you don't have particular reaction to, situations you don't have any particular reaction to. Recognize that, when off cushion especially, everything you come into contact basically falls into these three types of objects. And with each of the objects, a particular poison arises. And when that poison arises, you need to counteract them. And that's the three roots of virtue. So it's a pithy list, yes. What do you do with the list? The list brings more awareness. So you might be mostly just, at the point of training where it's noticing, starting to notice how you, even, precognitive, you have already labeled this as pleasant and this as unpleasant. So start to, kind of off cushion, relative Tonglen, relative bodhicitta, not Tonglen, relative bodhicitta is about recognizing our mind. The way we label things into like, don't like, and don't care. Once we have like, don't like, and don't care, then we have the three poisons. And with regards to the three poisons, we need the three roots of virtue to counteract them. Yeah, then more specific ways of counteracting in all activities trained by means of the words. So remember these words, remember the precepts and the commitments, and know when you encounter a particular situation, which line, among the precepts or the commitments, which line is a direct line that can illuminate the situation for you. But it first comes from, understanding the three objects, the three poisons, and the three roots of virtue. Then the next line, is how to transform suffering into happiness. Basically, that's what's going on. Trained by the means of the words to do what? To transform suffering into happiness. The buzz is back.
Back.
Oh, it's gone. Good.
Right, there you go.
Sweet way.
I really don't know.
Oh, CNN is back.
Yeah, it came back. I'm sorry.
Lyons didn't make it home that night. Walden says his mission is to continue the work he and Dylan.
I don't know.
This is like the commercials, So
I pushed the button with a little home symbol on it, and that's when we
Yeah.
got CNN.
Yeah, awesome.
And then, did I mute it?
But that's okay because he's still talking.
I don't, and now I don't know what to do. I could just keep pushing buttons.
No, it's, why don't we just turn the TV off and stay with we can look at the,
Okay,
I
know that button, on-off button.
and we'll watch the laptop because the TV is misbehaving and it gets fired.
Yeah.
So you can turn up your volume a lot.
Yeah. So definitely this is a, disagreeable object that has turned up.
Yes,
And aversion to the poison,
yeah. You can still hear us okay, right?
Oh, yes. And I see trees, lots of trees.
Oh, our
Oh, wait a minute.
camera.
Oh, let me turn on the
I don't think
video.
you have to turn off the camera. Yeah. Yes.
All right.
Yes.
Hello.
you want-
Hello.
I
Yeah.
have kind of like a very general question. I wonder if is Lojong something that all the different lineages practice, or is it specific to only certain lineages?
Oh no, it's all the lineages, and so the success of this Lojong material has resulted in all the lineages absorbing these instructions, these instructions, these texts into their at one point it was specific to the Kadampa. But the influence and the success of the Kadampa lineage also meant that the demise of the Kadampa lineage as a separate tradition. So in part, I think also that's why Lojong has, in my opinion, not gained its own standing. Now other traditions are absorbing it into a kind of like you could say secondary set of instructions to reinforce whatever main thing that they do in each of those traditions.
Okay.
My theory of also why the integrity of like the tradition is somewhat compromised, not deliberately, but just the way it has been absorbed by other traditions. So once upon a time, there were people who completely just focus on Lojong, the Lojong way. They don't do other. But that has kind of gone away. So then its success, its potency has also resulted in its not being preserved in that way of, its distinctive flavor being kept alive and distinguished, from other approaches.
What was lost?
Most people don't pay attention, for example, to the structure. Most people don't use it as their main practice. It's always an auxiliary occasion to talk about, and it's also just taken as good to know. It has its own style. It has its own flavor. Oh, the bus comes back.
Sounds like this is maybe. So weird.
Oh, it's gone. Yeah.
Can you hear us, Dr. Lye?
Can you hear us?
Yes. Oh yes. Oh yes. We can hear.
But we don't have a sound source.
Well, this is back on.
Oh, it's on?
Yeah, I can hear.
Did that get?
Oh yeah.
Can you hear us?
Oh yeah.
She pulled. Did anything get loosened?
You hear us.
Oh,
We don't hear you.
We don't hear
Oh.
him.
I hear him.
I don't know what it.
I quit. One of y'all figure it out.
Oh, we're good now. Just dedicate, you know. It's 12:20. Here, we'll send them a check.
There we go. All right, now we
All
hear you.
right. Yeah, it's 12:20, so you can just, you know, dedicate now before more annoyances come up, you know. You got to see how much you can handle, how much suffering you can handle before, you know.
It's a song.
What is it about? Yeah, you know, like we get so used to, you know, internet being stable, internet being reliable, everything is just, you know, we get so used to it, right? But fundamentally, it's not stable.
Especially audio, in my experience.
So, okay. Mm,
Yeah.
yeah, so I'm gonna go now. Next week, I probably won't be able to join you all, but it's probably good. I think the intention really was more like one on, one off, so that during the off, y'all can, you know, continue listening or continue reading and discussing. Reason I've been able to come on the last few times, in part, is to compensate for a long stretch of me not being able to come at all. And now I think it's overdoing it. So even some entities are hinting to causing this buzzing.
You think it's a signal from the universe?
Not universe, like some of the local spirits, you know. Like,
Oh, the local done. Well,
I think so.
yeah, okay, well, we'll do a
Hey.
smoke offering and clear it.
so we got to take a hint, you know. So yeah, so I will see all of you, and the checks came from EBS. Joyce sent them, and thank you so much. This is all about interdependence, and this is the foundational interdependence. I'm very happy for those of you who are able to help in the form of, you know, financial, which of course is a big piece of what everything that you're trying to do needs. But it's more than that also, you know, your dedication, your wish, your prayer, and all of that for the success of this project. This is at the foundational level. I mentioned it in other places. I don't know if I've mentioned it to you guys specifically, but some of you have heard me talk about this. It's like I just have this feeling at this foundational level. I only want like the support to come from people who I feel called, you know, without me talking too much about it, without any of us talking too much about it, who I feel called to respond. And that's a good interdependence to, you know, and from there, then good things can grow. If I sell it too much, you know, then I'm like creating some, you know, not so good interdependence. Creating an expectation and, you know, all of that, and, you know, then it's not good. So it's good that, you know, it's just, you know, the basic idea of what it is, right? The trust, you know. So I recognize, you know, there's a lot of trust, you know. So when I say there's no expectation, I'm not trying to say, you know, I'm not responsible. I will be responsible for the project and we'll do our best, you know, all of that. But it's much better, you know, if there's no big talk about promising this and that and 100 years and 200 years and this will forever be good, and you know, that kind of talk is not present. It's like good, you know. And so I feel good, you know, that this is a good foundation. This is a foundation of trust and inspiration, you know. So thank you so much. And
Thank you.
oh, okay,
Thank
bye.
you.
Bye, see you next
Bye,
time.
guys.
Bye. Yesterday, I was learning how to, I went to the Baptist church